Hello and welcome everyone. In this video, we are going to learn about the Ivan's Gambit. Ivan's Gambit is one of the most attacking gambit from the white side. In this video, we will be covering all the strategies, tricks and traps that will be helpful to play this opening successfully. So let's get started. It comes after the Italian game e4, e5, knight to c3, knight c6, bishop c4. Now we have seen there are two choices which black can do here is play their knight to f6 or play the bishop to c5. Ivan's Gambit comes after the move after bishop c5. Here, white is not going for normal knight c3 or is not playing their pawn to c3 with the idea to play pawn d4. But you can sacrifice a pawn. For what are we sacrificing and which pawn? So we sacrifice the pawn on b4, attacking this bishop. Now we sacrifice in the Ivan's Gambit to get a quicker development and a better position, to get attack in the center. Here when you attack on the bishop, there are three ways which black can respond with. Either he can capture the pawn with his bishop, he can capture it with his knight, or he can go back with his bishop anywhere. Right? So in this video, we will be discussing all the three lines. Let's start with what if the bishop captures on the b4 square. Once he captures on b4, we will be playing our pawn to c3, attacking this bishop further. Now here bishop has three good choices to go to. Either he can go back on a5, or can go back on e7, or he can stay back on c5 square. Now going on d6 and f8 is pointless because f8 is going back on the home square, wasting of moves, and if you go on d6 then you hamper the development of this d7 pawn and then the bishop will not be able to come out. That's why these three are the main choices which black can do. Let's first start by looking at bishop to e7. When he places bishop to e7, now we can go with the quick attack and development, play our pawn to d4. When he captures the pawn on the d4 square, we will be capturing it with our c pawn. Now look at our pieces and our king is ready to castle. We are all attacking it. Later the idea can be to play the bishop to a3 and stop him from castling. These two pieces are doing fine. Look at these two pawns strong in the center, and like that way white is ahead in development. If he is not capturing on the d4 square, instead he places pawn to d6, trying to defend his e5 pawn. Then we can go with our queen to b3. Now the idea behind queen b3 is to give an attack on this weak f7 square. This is creating a battery. The bishop and queen are creating a battery to give an attack on the f7 square. If he defends it with his knight to a5, trying to attack our bishop and the queen, then we can first play our bishop f7, give a check. The king cannot go to d7 because then queen e6 and then followed by d5 would be a complete disaster for black. Right? And what if he goes on the f8 square? Then you can simply play your queen to a4. If he captures on the f7, you can capture the knight. Now look at the white pieces. The pieces are well placed, well developed. Also, we have compensated with our pawn. So white is doing much better on. Okay, now let's see what if he's not going back on the e7 square. Instead, the bishop goes back on a5. Even after the bishop goes back on a5, we are going to go aggressively. We are going to play our pawn to d4. After he captures on the d4 square, then we cannot capture this with the c pawn because the bishop is pinning our king. So we'll first castle, and then if he gets greedy and tries to capture another free pawn on the c3 square, then we can simply go with our queen to b3. Now we are again aiming at this f7 square. Now there are only two ways of defending this. Either he can play his queen to e7 or he can play his queen to f6. Now queen f6 is better because that also defends the pawn to c3. Let's have a look what happens if he plays his queen to f6 first. If he plays his queen to f6, then you can play a pawn to e5 attacking the queen. If the knight captures it, then you are going to pin the knight and take advantage of it. If he plays his pawn to d6, then we can simply play our queen to b5, give a check and win the bishop. After he plays his queen to e7, we will be capturing the pawn on c3 square with our knight. If he now plays his knight to f6, which is a quick development, trying to castle, then we'll first give an attack to his queen, playing our knight to d5. If the knight captures our knight, then we will be capturing it back with the pawn and aiming for this pin. Right now it's not possible, but sooner or later we are going to do that. If he plays his knight to b4, then we can play our rook to e1. Trying to defend the knight, we can play our rook to e1. And if he is not playing his knight to e4, instead he goes with his knight to e5, then we can capture the knight. The queen captures it back. Now you play our bishop to b2, attack the queen. And then you are also attacking this g7 square. Okay, I want to show you one more line over here. What if he is not capturing on the d5 square with his knight, instead he is capturing on the e4 square with his queen? Once he does that, we can play our bishop to g5. attack the knight, put some more pressure over it. If now he castles, which will be a blunder because now he can capture the knight, he captures back, and it will be a fork on his king as well as the queen. This was all about what happens when he places bishop to a5. Now let's have a look what happens when he places bishop to c5. Even after bishop c5, we are going to play our pawn to d4. When the pawn captures it, you capture it back, attacking the bishop. If the bishop goes back, then the idea is simple. When the bishop goes back, you are now going to go with your queen to b3, attack the f7 square. Your knights will be well placed on this square. You will be bringing them over here. The bishop comes to a3, trying to stop him from castling. Eventually, you can also play your queen to a3. So there are a lot of ideas what white can do here, right? Have a look. Okay, now let's have a look. What if he's not capturing the pawn with his bishop? Instead, he is capturing it with his knight. So when the knight captures on the b4 square, then we can attack the knight. The knight has to retreat, and then we can simply castle. Now let's see what happens if he is not capturing the pawn. So we are not a pawn down, but instead he simply goes back with his bishop on the b6 square. So if he goes back on the b6 square, that is waste of move. We are already ahead in development, and we can simply play our pawn to c3. Next we can just castle, play our queen to b3, and our position will have a quick development in the position, and as white, it would be completely winning. I hope this was helpful for you all, and you will be able to win a lot of games using this Ivan's Gambit. For more such tricks and traps, stay tuned with us. Till that time, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.